Okay.
You're an essential worker, aren't you?
HVAC?
Yeah.
Yeah, HVAC is essential.
So you're not affected.
We're not completely affected. A little bit we're affected because we're limited to where we could go. Okay, so let's see what we have over here. The Gemara was discussing a balchoiv. If a balchoiv, when a malva collects collateral from a loiva, when a malva collects collateral from a loiva, when do we say that the malva took ownership of the collateral? Abaye says we look at it like the collateral already became the malva's property when the loan started. While Rava says the property only becomes property of the malva when he actually takes possession of that property as part of his repayment. And the nafkamina, the Gemara said, would be if the malva was makdish or he sold this property after the time of the loan, but before the collection. According to Abaye, that's a good sale because we say the malva controlled it at that time, because you say we look at it like the malva took possession of the repayment at the time of the loan, while Rava says it's not a good hektish, it's not a good mechira, because the malva doesn't get possession of it until he actually collects it. So the Gemara had a problem with our Mishnah based on this halacha, because our Mishnah says if a yid borrows money from a goy and he puts up chometz as collateral, and the yid borrows the money from the goy before Pesach, so there's chometz of a Jew that's being used as collateral for the loan, we say that it's not chometz sha'over of a Pesach, it's mutar bano. We look at it like it's the goy's, which would indicate that we hold like Abaye, which would be difficult on Rava. So the Gemara answered, Kisher Herhinu Etzloi. We're not speaking about a standard loan that you paid back with Shava Kesef. We're speaking about where you designated this chometz to be the repayment in the event that the loiva cannot come up with the cash, and you actually placed the chometz in the rishus of the malva. So this chometz was in the malva's house all along this chometz was in the malva's house all along through Pesach. So therefore, if the goy has possession of it as the malva, even Rava would agree that it's not considered in the rishus of the yid. But if you flip it around, if the yid was the malva and the goy gave the yid chometz before Pesach as collateral, and it was in the yid's house, so there it would become Asher Bano, and that's why the Mishnah says in the Seifa that if the yid was the malva and he's holding collateral of the goy, that chometz becomes Asher Bano. We consider it chometz sha'avar of a Pesach. The Gemara brought a brisa that also says something similar, but with an additional complication. And the brisa says, in the Reisha, the brisa discusses a case where the Jew lent the goy money. So based on what we know up until now, if a Jew lent the goy money, and it's a case of herhinu etzloi, then what would be the halacha? It would be over. It would be over. The problem is, this brisa brings a machlekes. Leimikatanoi Yisrael shehilva l'nachri al chemtzoi lachar Pesach einay over. Mishum meir amru over. So here our problem is, even if you want to learn that this brisa is speaking kisher herhino etzloi, why would there be a machlekes? In our Mishnah, we said that if it's a mashkin and it's in the rishus of the malva, we look at it like the Malva has possession of it, and therefore it would be usher because we would consider it Chomet Shavuot of Pesach. Yet over here we have a machlokes. So that's going to require some type of explanation. In the Seifa, the Brisa says, "Aval nochi shovel Yisrael." If the goy was the Malva, al chemtzoi lacha Pesach dirak kol over. Here it says that even if the goy is holding the mashkin, everybody holds is over, which again would not be consistent with our Mishnah, who says that if the Nachri is holding the Chometz and the Nachri is the Malva, it wouldn't be over. So that's what we need to explain. We don't have an explanation for this brisa. Why there's a machlokes why is there a machlokes when the Yid is the Malva, and why does everybody hold that when the Goy is the Malva, we don't say like we said in our Mishnah that it becomes the Goy's and therefore it's not over. Rather, we say that it's considered like it's in the Rishus of the Yisrael and it is over. So that's the problem that we left off with yesterday. So the Gemara on Amud Beis, which is where we're up to, Elahacha b'maya skinon kigoyin sheherhino etzlai. It's speaking where there's a mashkin like we said until now. The kamifel and the Gemara introduces now a new svar. We were basing everything that we were saying up until now on an understanding that Balchoiv is Konya Mashkin. The significance of her Hinu Etzloi is that since I took this Mashkin, this Chometz, and I placed it into the Rishus of the Goy, and now the Goy is holding it as a Mashkin, that's why the Goy owns it. Nothing to do with Abai and Rava. Abai and Rava are speaking where it's not even a Mashkin. Anything that you pay back with, it's considered Lemafrei Ugoiva according to Abai. But even Rava would agree that if I designated this Chometz to be the repayment, it is the Mashkin, and I actually give it to the Malva, there for sure it's considered in the Rishus of the Malva. However, that assumption is not agreed upon unanimously. There's a machlokes about it. And the reason why there's a machlokes in the Reisha of the Mishnah, in the Reisha of the Brisa, where the Yisrael was the Malva, and our understanding is since the Yisrael is the Malva, for sure it should be over. Why is there a machlokes? Why is there a shita who holds Eino over? It's because this halacha that the Yitzchak said that the Balchoiv is kohen the mashkin is not across the board. There's details. Where do we even know that the Balchoiv is kohen the mashkin? And like David Kutner spoke at yesterday, I was mixing up the shir, that if the Balchoiv is kohen the mashkin, what is the litmus test as to whether or not the Balchoiv is kohen the mashkin? Who has to insure it? Who's responsible for it? If the mashkin becomes nenas, if listim mizuyin come and take the mashkin away from the malva, who has to pay for that? Who has to make that up? If the balchoiv is kohen mashkin, then it's the malva's problem. If the malva was nenas, if an oyus occurred on this mashkin, the malva has to pay up that mashkin because he's kohen, it's his. So how do you know that the balchoiv is kohen mashkin? Shenemar, it says, the pasuk tells us that if you're a malva and you have a loiva who's a poor person and he gives you his night beged, let's say he gives you his quilt as a mashkin, you should give it back to him every night to be able to use. And in the morning, only during the day, should you hold that mashkin. And you should give the loiva back the mashkin when he needs it. Now, the Torah says the fact that you give it back to the loiva to use, let's say it's a beged laila, so you give him back his quilt to use at night, that's will lechoti tzedakah. That will get you brownie points because you're doing a tzedakah. Frek the Gemara, frek the Yitzchak, im eina kaina mashkin. If the balchoiv is not kaina the mashkin, so then by giving it back to the loiva for the night, tzedakah minayin, you're giving him his own beged. So why would that be called tzedakah if you're giving him back his own beged? So from the fact that the Torah considers it a tzedakah, that you're allowing the loiva to use this mashkin at night, that proves that it must be your mashkin. And by you letting him use it, it's a tzedakah. So mikan l'balchoiv shekoyne mashkin. So the whole makar that a balchoiv is koyne mashkin is only because the Torah calls it a tzedakah. Now, what was the scenario in which the Torah was talking about? The Torah was talking about a malva who's a Jew and a loiva that's a Jew. And there, the Torah is saying The Bachoiv is koine the mashkin, and by lending it back to the loiva, he's doing a tzedakah. So Tanakama Sover, Hanimili Yisrael mi Yisrael. Who the Karina Bay, L'cha Tia Tzedakah. The Torah only uses the word L'cha Tia Tzedakah where we're talking about a Malva and a Loiva, who are both Jewish, and therefore it's called a Tzedakah. So therefore only by a Yisrael and a Yisrael do you say the Bakoiv is Koine Mashkin. Of a Yisrael Menachri. What if the Yisrael lent money to a Nachri? Maybe he's not Koine the Mashkin. And that would be the svara of the Tanakama of the Brisa, who said that even though the Yisrael is the Malva, the chometz of the guy that's in his rishos, the Yid's not koine it right away. The Yid's not koine it because this whole halacha of a chayv koine mashkin does not apply if the loiv is a guy. Reb Meir Sover, Reb Meir holds kal v'chomer Yisrael mi Yisrael kani. If a Yisrael is koine the mashkin of a loiv who's a Yisrael. Surely his rights connected a goy should be even. The Torah should give a Jew more rights connected a goy, and surely there the Bachai will be koine mashkin. So therefore, the ratio of the brisa that we just discussed, where the Yisrael was the Malva and the goy was the loiva, if you hold that the Yisrael was koine the mashkin, then you're going to hold over. But if you're going to hold that the Yisrael was not koine the mashkin, then you go deino over. So that explains the two shittas of the ratio. The Sefer says that when the Nochri was the Malva, for sure the Chometz is considered like it's in the Yisrael's Rishos, and he will be over. So the Gemara fears us. Aval Nochri shel Beis Yisrael, but if the Nochri is the Malva and the Yisrael is the Loiva, al Chemtzoi, then Achar Pesach, Divrei HaKoil over, everybody would hold that the Goy is not koine the Mashkin, and therefore the Mashkin, the Chometz was in the Rishos of the Yid al Pesach. Hasam Vadai Nochri mi Yisrael loikon. So now the Gemara is telling us that this whole idea of Herhinu Etzloi is not a foolproof Eitzah. It only works for sure by Yisrael who lent money to a Yisrael, or maybe it might also work if a Yisrael lent money to a Goy, and there'd be a machlekes about it. But if a Goy lent money to a Yisrael, for sure he's not koine the mashkin, and therefore would be also. Based on where we're holding right now, our Mishnah is going to be difficult again, according to Rava, because our Mishnah says, Nachi Shehovel Yisrael Achemtzai. If the Nachi is the Malva and Yisrael is the Loiva, our Mishnah says, Achar Pesach Muter Bano. In fact, the Gemara, you on Amar Aleph, you said that our Mishnah is discussing the Hinami, the Herhinu Etzloi, even though you made this comment into a Mashkin, but we said a moment ago that a Goy who's the Malva will not be koine the mashkin from the Yid. Hamrid Nachem Yisrael loikani. So if the guy is not koine the mashkin, why is it that in our Mishnah's case, when the guy is the Malva, we say that the chometz is in the possession of the guy for Pesach, and therefore it's not considered chometz shavel of a Pesach. Yet the Brisa says beferish it is chometz shavel of a Pesach. So you clearly see that, but you don't say ba'chayv koine mashkin when it comes to a guy. So, how could you explain in our Mishnah when the guy is the Malva and the guy is holding on to the Chametz? How could you explain that I'm not over on Bal Yerah Bal Yamatzah? And how could you explain that the Chametz should be mutter after Pesach? So, Gemara Anu Chiddush, Had Amalei Me'achshav, Had Loy Amalei Me'achshav. In our Mishnah, when the Yid gave the guy his Chametz, he didn't just give it to him as a mashkin. He said that if I don't, let's say the loan happened on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and he said he gave the guy the Chametz on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and he said, if I don't pay you back by Rosh Chodesh Iyar, I want you to be koine my Chametz right now. So it's almost like a t'nai nemechira. If I end up paying you back, then I'm not being makna. I'm not being makna my Chametz to you now. But if I end up not paying you back on Rosh Chodesh Iyar, I'm being makna to you my Chametz right here, right now. So it's actually acting as a sale. You're giving me $100. You're lending me $100. I'm giving you chametz. If I end up paying you back, then this is not a sale. But if I don't end up paying you back, this is a sale. So that's how the Gemara wants to learn our Mishnah. So therefore, it makes perfect sense that the chametz that the Yid gave to a guy as a mashkin would be considered not in the Rishus of the Yid, would be considered in the Rishus of the guy, because the Yid spoke out beferish when he gave this chametz to the guy that if I don't pay you back on time, I want you to be koine my chametz now. So therefore, at the end of the day, how do we know pshat in our Mishnah? What is pshat in our Mishnah? Pshat in our Mishnah is very simple. The Reish of the Mishnah says that when a Yid lent money to a Goy, and the Yid took a mashkin from the Goy, the halach is it's also but not considered Chometz Shel for Pesach, because the Reish of the Mishnah holds that B'choiv kind of mashkin, even a Yid from a Goy. The Seifa that says when the Goy was the Malva, and the Yid gave the Chometz as collateral, that's speaking where the Yid said that if I don't pay you back on time, you're going to be kind of my Chometz, my mashkin, from the time of the loan. When we not tamer the shani long, the shani lay, when hecha dama machshav, when hecha the loy amar machshav. How do you know that? How do you know that there's such a distinction? Do you see any precedent to this idea that machshav works to make the chometz be nicknamed to the malva at the time of the halva? So come to Tanya, nachri shehirin pas purni etzel Yisrael. Now in those days their ovens were small, or even in our days. If you wanted to make a Suda challah, you wouldn't be able to bake that in your oven. You need to use a commercial oven, a much bigger oven, to make a Suda challah. So we're talking about a Suda challah. Paspun is a huge challah. Why is the Brisa punkt picking a Suda challah? Because if we're talking about collateral, how much collateral is a challah worth? $5. A Suda challah, which would have a lot greater value, that's something that practically speaking would be more likely for a Nachri to use as a mashkin. So Nachri Shehirin pas purni ate to Yisrael, which means the Nachri borrowed money from the Yisrael, and for collateral he gave a Suda challah, and this occurred right before Pesach. And then after Pesach, the halach is einay over. Even though the Jew was holding on to the Suda challah all Pesach long, it's not by Yerah by Yematzeh, because we're going to say that this Suda challah belonged to the Goy. I was not ever by Yerah by Yematzeh. But from Amar Lo, if the Goy told the Jew, he got ticha, if he used the word he got ticha, over, then we look at it like it's in the possession of the Yid, and he'll be over by Yerah. What is the difference if he said he got ticha? In other words, what does this he got ticha mean? He got ticha means me'achshav. So if the Goy, when he gives to the Yid this mashkin, this big Suda challah, he says, if I don't pay you back after Pesach, I'm being makna this bread to you now. Well, then, in fact, the Yid owned this bread throughout Pesach, and it makes sense that he should be over by Yerah by Yematzeh. Shema Minah. So from this brayso, you see that when the loiva tells the malva me'achshav or higaticha, it actually works to say that the malva takes possession and takes full ownership of the mashkin at the time of the Havla. Now we're in easy Gemara. Tanarban, Chanush Shal Yisrael. What happens if a Jew owns a store, Umalai Shal Yisrael, and all of the inventory belongs to the Jew? But throughout Pesach, Goyim walk into the store. So what happens if you find chametz on the floor in the store or anywhere in the store after Pesach? Zogt the Brisa, chametz nim shesham achar Pesach is asher b'no. Because you're not going to assume that someone in there dropped it. You're going to assume this was part of the inventory. And it's for sure asher b'achila. What about chanush shal nochri, umalai shal nochri, upoil Yisrael, nechnas of yotzim l'sham? What if it's a goyish store and the inventory belongs to a goy, but Jews go in and out? So basically, if you're in Costco and you find some chametz on the floor, you find a Danish on the floor, you can assume it was from Costco and it belonged to a goy, and it's not something that a Yid dropped, and it would be Asher Bano because it belonged to a Yid. You assume that any item that you find in the store came from the inventory. I'm sure that's only if that store carried that product. Otherwise, mechatesa that it belonged to the store.
Isn't there a Gemara that speaks about whether money is found on one side of the counter by a store and the other side of the counter to make the difference where that money is found? Meaning, if it's found on the customer side of the counter, it belongs to the customer, and on the inside, it belongs. So the money found, money in a store.
That's money.
Okay.
We're talking about product, chametz. So it could have fell off the shelf, or it could have been personal food that the visitor brought in.
The product, which the store obviously carries, will always belong to the store.
We make the assumption that it belongs to the store.
Because it's on both sides of the counter anyway. Money is never on the
That's right.
customer side.
That's right. Okay, Zok Gemara. Chometz shenafla olav mapoilus. You had a big, beautiful piece of chometz. You had a donut sitting on the floor, and the wall tumbled down on it, and now it's buried under a whole bunch of rubble. So the halacha is areu kamavur. And the Shimon ben Gamliel tells us how buried does it have to be. Shimon ben Gamliel Eimer kol she'einat kelev yochel lachapes achro. It has to be buried deep enough that a dog will not dig after it. Omer B'chista, v'tzorich she'yibatel b'liba. You also have to make bittul, because just in case someone digs up and clears away the rubble on Pesach, you don't want to be over by Yirah, so therefore you should be mevatel it anyway for good measure. Zok the Martana, we learned Kama Chavish Zakelev. Shimon Gamliel tells us if it's buried deep enough that a dog wouldn't dig it out, then you don't have a problem with Yirah. Well, can you please give me a measurement? Zok the Gemara Shloishet Tvachim. It has to be buried 3 Tvachim, so it's about 12 inches deep. It has to be at least 3 Tvachim below the surface of the rubble. To look, to dig up.
To dig?
Well, chipish I thought means to look, to search.
Right.
But I guess when a dog is searching, it's also digging it up.
Right.
But the actual meaning, I think, means to search. I think the denotation is search.
That's better because the caliph can dig down a foot.
Right. The question is how far he would dig.
No, the
But
question
you
is
can't
whether
smell.
He can smell.
I hear.
He's only going to dig if he smells. If he can't smell it, then he can't dig for it.
And the Gemara makes that distinction in a second. That's a good point. So Amol Yerbachaber Rabbi Yosy Rabashi Had Amar Shmuel Ksafim Ein Lam Shmir Ela Bekarka. Shmuel said halacha that if you are a shomer chinam and someone gives you cash to watch, unless you buried it underground, if it was stolen, we say that you're a paisheya and you have to pay back. The only way to properly watch kesef that it shouldn't be a pshia would be to bury it. So how deep do you have to bury it? It's not food, it's cash. How deep do you have to bury it? Miba inan shloishet tfachim oiloi. Does it have to be also buried 3 tfachim like with your chametz, or is it enough just to bury it a little bit? Amalei ha chamishum reicha. When it's food that the dog will sniff up and dig after, that's why being shloishet tfachim. But hasam, but when you talk about money, the whole purpose of the money is mishum mechsiyah me'enahu. It's just that so robbers won't see it. So therefore, shloishet tfachim. But how much do you need? Rav from the city of Sichra said tefach. You should bury the money at least a tefach, because that a dog won't smell. Which is very interesting, because in February I went there to Israel, and we brought with us $5,000 of cash. My wife had it in her purse, and as we're walking through customs, the Israeli security, they have a dog, and it runs right up. I had a mezainis in my pocket. The dog didn't come to smell me. The dog went straight to my wife's purse and started sniffing the purse. And they asked us, "Do you have cash in the purse?" And we said, "Yes." The dog was trained to sniff out the cash. So I guess if the goyim have a sniffing dog with them, then you also have to bury it 3 tefachim. Yeah. If it was gold, they wouldn't. See, if you smuggle gold, they can't catch you.
But I know that paper
has a smell. I hear. Okay, so more weiter. Ha'oichel trumas. When the dog came over and sniffed, I thought they're going to ask, "Do you have drugs?" And I was so excited to say no. Then as if I had cash, I said, yes. Zok more weiter. Ha'oichel trumas chametz bepesach b'shogi. So the halacha is, if one eats truma b'shogi, if one eats truma b'shogi, a Yisrael or a Zor, one who's not allowed to eat truma, if he eats truma b'shogi, the halacha is that you have to pay back keren v'chomish. You have to pay back the original truma, and you have to add a chomish to it. But that's only if you did it b'shogi. If you did it b'mezid, you're chayiv misa b'dei shemayim, and you have to pay back like any other theft that you would have to pay back. But if you eat b'shogi, the Torah tells us there's a special rule that you pay keren v'chomish. The pasuk also tells us another special rule. The pasuk says v'nosan l'koyin es hakodesh, and that teaches us that when you cannot pay back when you eat truma of a koyin b'shogi, you can't just say, okay, it's worth $10. Here's $10. You want an extra chaimish? Here's another $2. You can't do that. Rather, davar haroyali is kodesh. You have to give back to the koyin as your payment something that could have become truma itself. You actually have to give payros. The payment has to be in payros when you're paying back a koyin for eating his truma b'shogi. But amazing, you give him cash. But this special halacha of the shogi, you pay keren b'chaimish, the pasuk says that payment has to be in pairs, which indicates that it's not a value for value that I'm paying back. It's a special gzeres hakosov that I'm giving you back pound for pound in pairs. Therefore, even if it's on Pesach, where it has no value, because chametz on Pesach is osher bano, if I took it from you b'mezid, then I shouldn't have to pay back at all because I didn't really steal from you anything of value. But if I did it b'shoigig, when the Torah says don't look at the value, you just pay back pairs for pairs, therefore you still have to pay back keren v'chaimish. But b'mezid, if you took the pairs b'mezid, so there we only look at you as a regular gazlan, and you stole something that has no value because it's on Pesach and it's osher bano, pater mitashlumin u'dumei eitzim. Not only am I pater for paying for the value of the pears that they're worth to eat, but we don't even say that these pears have value that the kohen could have used them as fuel, because chametz and Pesach, we learned you're not allowed even to use it as fuel. Zok the Gemara, Tanan Hasam. We learned in a brisa, ha'ochel truma b'shoigig. If one eats truma b'shoigig, mishalom keren v'chaimish. He must pay keren and the chaimish. Echad ha'ochel v'echad ha'shoyse. It doesn't matter if one ate truma or if one drank truma. V'echad ha'sach. Even if somebody used it to smear, we say that's sichas kishtia and it's bechlal achila. Either way, echad truma tameya. It doesn't matter if the truma was tamei. The echad truma tahira. It doesn't matter if the truma was tahar. Mishalom chaimish. You have to pay keren v'chaimish because the Torah says the nasan lachayin is a kodesh. Now, what happens if you gave the keren, you gave the chaimish, and then you went and you ate the chaimish? Does this chaimish have the halacha of regular truma? Zok the Gemara, yes. The chumsha. If you ended up eating that chaimish after you gave it to the kohen, you're going to have to do keren v'chaimish on that because it becomes real truma. Iboilu, kashu mishalom. When you pay back this pairs for pairs, how do you know how many pairs to pay back? Is it lefi midah mishalom? So if I ate a pound of pairs, I have to pay back a pound of pairs? Or lefi dam mishalom? Or do you say if I ate $10 worth of pairs, I have to pay back $10 worth of pairs? So I have to give it to them in pairs, but it is based on the value of the pairs that you ate. Now, of course, we just learned from our Mishnah that says that you're chayiv even if you ate chametz on Pesach truma, which is no value, that you still have to pay back. So our Gemara will soon bring a raya from our Mishnah that it's not value dollar-wise, it's pound for pound. But here the Gemara clears the shaila. Lefi midah mishalom or lefi dam mishalom? Is it pound for pound or is it the value of pairs? Zok the Gemara. If when the Yisrael unlawfully ate the truma of the kohen, it was worth 4 zuzim, and now that it's coming time to pay back, and now by payback time, this same pound of pairs is only worth a zuz. There everybody agrees you for sure have to give back to the kohen at the least the value that you took from him. Because even though there's a special chiyuv of a nasan lakonis hakodesh, it doesn't absolve you from the baseline chiyuv that you would have as a gazlan. We learned about Makama that a gazlan who buys something and the thing becomes worth less, unless he can say unless he can give back the actual item that he took. If he's paying back the value of it, he has to pay back its value that it was worth when he stole it. So he would have to give him back 4 zuzim. Our question here about whether truma you pay back the value or the pound is in the opposite direction. The mikar shavi zuzah. When you ate this pound of apples, it was worth a zuz. And now that you're paying back the apples that you ate were worth 4 zuzim. So what do we say? Do we just pay back the amount that I ate, which is which would mean you stole from him, you ate from him something that was only worth a zuz, but now you're actually paying him back something that's worth 4 zuzim? When I ate the pears, I ate 1 zuz worth of pears. That might have been a pound. Now that a quarter of a pound is worth a zuz, I only have to give him back a quarter of a pound. So I have to pay him back in pears, but only a quarter of a pound, which is the value of what I ate from him. It says, what if a person ate groy, which are dried figs, which are not so valuable, he ate that truma of a coin, and when he paid back, b'shilam tomorrow, and he paid back in dates. Now dates are much more expensive than figs, than dried figs. So it says the Brisa says Tavei la bracha. Such a person should be gebenched because he's giving back to the coin a lot more than he took away. So let's analyze this. If it's pound for pound, so sure, a pound of dates is worth a lot more than a pound of figs. He ate a pound of groigris, which was only worth one zuz, and he's giving back the same pound of tamarim, which are worth much more. So of course, he's giving the kohen a very generous payment. If you hold that when you pay him back in pairs, but you only give him back the value of what you took, so then he ate one zuz worth of groigris. It might have been a pound. He's paying back a zuz worth of tamarim, but there might be a tenth of a pound because he's only giving back the dollar value worth. Chaim, see, you're shaking your head.
No, let me hear what the Gemara says.
Zok the Gemara, Amar Baya l'olam l'fidam mishalom. It could still be l'fidam. So v'amai tavil l'bracha, very simple. He ate something that's not so easy to sell. It's something that's not so attractive because shalamidi the kavil l'zvini. He's sure he's giving back the same value, but he's giving back to the kohen something that has much, much more value because it's something that's much easier to sell.
I thought the Gemara could say that it's much easier to store.
Oh, because it fits into a smaller space.
Yeah, if you steal a crate of figs,
it's more dense, basically.
yeah,
I hear that's a good art. They actually collect.
Is it kind of allowed to sell as truma?
Sure.
He could. I wasn't sure about that. Okay,
Which
so
is a very interesting one.
Can only sell it to a kohen, or he can sell it to Yisrael?
He could sell it to a Yisrael too, but Yisrael can't do much with it.
Right. So that was really my question. The whole value, if he can just sell it, that's why it's more valuable. But he's limited. He's very limited to who he could sell it.
So I want to elaborate on that because there's actually a shaila, right? But there's actually a big shaila when we say that you pay back lefidamim, right? And if you pay back its value, everybody agrees, like David Zolty just said, that chulin has a pound of chulin will be worth more money than that same pound of truma, because my customer base is much more vast with chulin. Anybody can use it, while truma only a kohen can use, and there's restrictions as to what he can do with it, and there's restrictions of if it becomes tamei. So truma is worth much less. So when we say that if you ate a zuz worth of truma, you have to pay back. So do you pay back the value of truma, or do you pay back the value of chulin? You pay back. So there's a shaila, because I ate truma. So if I'm paying back that value in chulin, I'm giving much less. If I'm paying that value in truma, I'm giving more because truma is worth less. Okay, so talking more about it. Now we're bringing our Mishnah into the mix. Now that we talked about this shaila, is it lefidamim or is it lefimida? Now we bring our Mishnah into the mix. Our Mishnah, Mishalom Kerem V'Chemish. If you were only paying weight for weight, it makes perfect sense because we don't care about the value. It's irrelevant to us that what you ate was asher bana and had zero value because we're not even judging this based on any monetary value. Shapir. Chametz on Pesach has no value. So oy bazoi, why is there any tashlum at all? So if we're in, what are you talking about? Of course, chametz could have value. Hamani Rabbi Yosy Aglili, maybe our Mishnah that assigns value to the chametz, maybe it's going according to Rabbi Yosy Aglili, the Omer chametz b'Pesach mutar barna, and it has value because the kohen could use it as fuel. Frag the Gemara, if our Mishnah is following the sheet of Rabbi Yosy Aglili, that there is a monetary value even in chametz on Pesach, the seifa of our Mishnah says by b'mezid, where you don't have this nasmal kodesh hakodesh, you don't have the special limud that it's pound for pound. There it's potter there you're potter because we say that by mezid it's like a regular gzela and you stole something that has zero value. Rabbi Yosy Aglili, if you want to argue that the Tana of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yosy Aglili, who holds that chametz on Pesach does have a value because you're allowed to have a no from it, why would you be potter? Why would you be potter? Zok to Gemara, I'll tell you why. Because Sover Law, Krab Nechunya ben Akana. Now you see the understanding of our Mishnah is a lot more than meets the eye. The reason why by Mazid you're potter is because of Kamle b'derabamine. The Tanya, Rab Nechunya ben Akana haya oisa es Yom Kippurim keshabbos l'tashlumin. The halach is, we learned a couple of days ago, there's something called Kamle b'derabamine. If somebody on Shabbos burns down the Godesh of his friend, he doesn't have to pay his friend the value of the Godesh. You know why? Because he's going to be chayiv skila for violating the Shabbos because of that same action, and the same action will not be mechayiv you momin and misa at the same time. So Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana said, not only does this apply to a misa b'dei adam, it even applies to chorus, which is not a misa b'dei adam. But if someone was burnt the Godesh on Yom Kippur, we're burning the Godesh, violated Yom Kippur, so he's chayiv chorus for that, he won't have to pay for the Godesh. Now, let's fear eyes over here. So over here, it's even a bigger chiddush, because over here, you have the chiyav misa b'dei shemayim of the truma. Now, the problem that we're going to have over here, if we're going with Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, that we're talking about a chiyav chorus, and that's why he's potter, so then why don't you have that in the Reisha as well? If there was a chiyav chorus here, why don't you have that in the Reisha as well? Because we're talking about chametz on Pesach. So Rashi explains very beautifully that because of the way we're learning the Brisa, you cannot learn that we're talking about a mazid of chametz and there's a chiyav chorus here, because then there would be no difference between the Reisha and the Seifa. So it has to be speaking where Lagabe chametz was for sure shoygig, and therefore there is no chiyav chorus. The whole shaila of shoygig and mazid is on the truma. So when you ate the truma b'shoygig in the Reisha, there was no chiyav misa b'dei shemayim. But when you ate the truma b'mezid, there was a chiyav misa b'dei shemayim, and that's why you're potter from paying back to the kohen the value. So oy bezoy, you might ask, if the chiyav misa b'dei shemayim here is because of the truma, so why b'chalal is the case of our Mishnah about Pesach? Pesach is not relevant. It's not relevant to Pesach. So the Rashi explains that our Mishnah is not just telling you the chiddush of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana that chorus patters you from tashlumin, because Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana already told us that. Our Mishnah is extending that chiddush and saying not only does this kamle b'derabbanei apply to an isser of chorus, it also applies to an isser of mitzvah b'dei shemayim. So because of that, we can't learn that the isser here is of chametz b'Pesach, which would give you a chiyav chorus, because that's not a chiddush. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana told us that. Our Mishnah is trying to say a bigger chiddush. Even if there is no chiyav here of Pesach, there's only a chiyav here of Truma, it's the Misa b'dei Shemayim that would also create a kamle b'derabbanei. Zok to Gemara kitanoi. Let's say this machlokes of whether or not you pay lefi domim or you pay lefi midah, let's say this is totally in a machlokes tanoi. Zok to Gemara. Ha'oichel trumas chametz b'Pesach. One who ate trumas chametz b'Pesach, potter minat tashlumin u'midmei eitzim divi Rabbi Kiva. He's potter from tashlumin to eitzim like Rabbi Kiva. So right off the bat, as default, we'll say Rabbi Kiva seems to hold that you pay back value and there's no value here. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri mechayiv. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says you're chayiv. So let's say that that's the machlokes. Is the chayiv to pay back value, lefi domim, and therefore you'd be potter, which is Rabbi Kiva shita, or is it only pound for pound? And that's Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Amalei Rabbi Kiva Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Kiva asked Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, how could you say you're chayiv? V'chima hano yesh leiba. What hano is someone having from this chametz on Pesach? Amar lo Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Rabbi Kiva, umahano yesh la'oichel truma tmeya b'shar kol yemos hashana shemeshalem. If a Yisrael eats truma tmeya of a kohen b'shar yemos hashana, there's no hano that the kohen could have had from this truma tmeya. Yet, nevertheless, you still have to pay back. So, therefore, I'm proving to you that you don't look at the value; it's pound for pound. Omar loy, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri responded, that's not a comparison. Loy imamid b'truma tmeya b'shayim hashana shav apish ein loy b'heter achila yesh loy b'heter asaka. The kohen, it says on the nazir lechem shmuras trumoisai, I'm giving you truma toyer to eat, and I'm also giving you truma tmeya to be able to use as fuel. So there is value to this truma to the kohen because he could have used it as fuel. So I understand Dr. Yochanan ben Nuri why over there you should pay back because you are damaging the kohen. You're taking away something of value. Tamer bezah by chametz on Pesach she'ein loy ba loy heter achila loy heter asaka. There is no heter at all to use chametz on Pesach, so there is no value. So therefore, I argue that it should be potter. Ha, l'maza doima. What could you compare chametz Pesach, truma of chametz Pesach? What could you compare it to a non-Pesach incident? Is the trumas tusum vanovim shenitma, and tusum vanovim you cannot use as fuel. They're just not good for fuel. They make juice, and the juice you can't burn. She'ein loy ba loy heter achila loy heter asaka, and there is no enough from it at all. But where did we say this halacha? Where do we say that you have to pay back? Even though Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri said
This is all the Akiva.
we had a conversation between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, right? Go back and forth.
Right, Rabbi Yochanan, it's Rabbi Kiva that's now replying to Rabbi Yochanan.
Oh, Rabbi Kiva said that it should be potter. Right, Rabbi Kiva said it should be potter. So, where did Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri say that you would be chayiv to pay? That's only the mafresh truma v'chmitza. That's only if you were mafresh truma on Pesach and then it became chametz, or if you were mafresh truma of chametz before Pesach and then Pesach came. Aval mafresh truma's chametz. If you are mafresh truma on Pesach, so on Pesach you had tevel that was chametz, and you were mafresh truma that was chametz on Pesach. Divrei hakoil eina kedusha. Everybody agrees that will not take on kedusha. You cannot be mafresh trumas chametz on Pesach, and the Gemara is going to explain later on where we know this from. But you cannot be mafresh trumas chametz on Pesach. It will not work. That will not work. Zok the Gemara. Tanya Yidich. We learned the brayso. V'nosan lakoyin es hakodesh. What do you pay back to the kohen? You pay him back kodesh. Dover haroya lias kodesh. You can only pay back with something that's royal lias kodesh. Prat. This will tell us to exclude la'oichel trumas chametz b'Pesach. If you eat truma of chametz on Pesach, shepatim in tashlumin, you'd be potter to pay back. Say the value of the food to be eaten. You'd even be potter to pay back the value of this chametz to be used as fuel. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rabbi Eliezer ben Chasma, Rabbi Eliezer Chasma Machai. Rabbi Eliezer Chasma holds Yechai. So again, we have a machlokes. We have a machlokes of if you're mechuyev to pay back truma of chametz. Omer lo Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer Chasma. It seems like it is. Yeah, it seems like it is. Well, these are all Tanoim here, so there's no problem. If two Tanoim are like two Tanoim, it's not an issue. It's only if my Roim are arguing.
Right, it's not an issue if a later Tana has the same machlokes.
I don't think so. And the Gemara is going to do an inventory at the end with all the Tanoim. So effectively, v'chima hano yesh leiba. So Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov said, "You Rabbi Eliezer Chasma, why are you being mechayiv? What hana is there? What value is there in this truma that was eaten?" Amar Rabbi Eliezer Chasma, Rabbi Eliezer, what are you talking about? So this is the same conversation as Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri had with Rabbi Kiva. Amar loy im amrit b'truma tmei b'shari ma'aseh shana sha'afa pi she'ein lo b'heter achila yesh lo b'heter asaka. That's what there's a chiyuv. Tamer bezu but chametz on Pesach she'ein lo heter achila lo heter asaka. Here it should not be mutter, and therefore it should have zero value. So Gemara amar loy af bezu yesh lo heter asaka. Why? Shemrotza hakoyin merita lefi kalboy ay masika tachas tafshila. Here, the koyin could use it, could have enough from it, which is clearly following Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So if you notice, in this conversation, Rabbi Eliezer Chasma said it's mutter b'ana and there is a value. But in the previous conversation between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri didn't come back with this title. And the Gemara is going to make note of that shortly. Zok the Gemara, Omar Abaye. So Abaye said, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who held it was potter, Rabbi Akiva, who held it was potter, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who held it was potter, Kula Svir Lahu, they all hold that Chametz Pesach Osher Bana. They all disagree with Rabbi Yosy Aglili, and they all hold that Chametz Pesach is Osher Bana. And this is the machlokes that they have with their counterparts. Rabbi Akiva Savar Lefidamim Mishalim. Rabbi Akiva holds you pay the value, and since you ate chametz of the coin on Pesach, which had zero value, therefore you're potter. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Savar Lefimidim Mishalim. I pay back pound for pound. So therefore, even though you ate something that was osir b'hana and nobody could use, you still have to pay back pound for pound, like our Mishnah says. So the more pshita. Why do I need Abaye's ingenuity to tell me this? It's very obvious when you read the Brisa and you read the machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. It's obvious that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's mechayev, it must be because it's l'fei midah mishalom. Zok Gemara, no, it's not so obvious. Because Ma'od Tema, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri namik Rabbi Akiva spherely. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri also holds l'fei damim. The Amar l'fei damim mishalom. So why does Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri say that you're chayiv to pay? Because there is value. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's reasoning for being mechayev you to pay back Keren B'Chomish is because he holds that chametz b'Pesach is mutar b'ana. Damer chametz b'Pesach mutar b'ana. Kamash malam. So Abaye's chiddush is don't learn pshat in Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri that he holds you chayev to pay back the chametz of truma because it has value, because it's mutar b'ana contribution. Rather, the right pshat in Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is that it's l'fei midah mishalom, and therefore, even though it has no value at all, you still mechuyev to pay. How does Abai know that? How can Abai be so sure what the reasoning of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was? Maybe his reasoning is because it has value. Dr. Gemara, no, because if he held it has value, imkein nahadele Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri Rabbi Akiva kihechi de mahadele Rabbi Elazar Chasma Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. What did Rabbi Elazar ben Chasma answer to Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov? He said it has value because the coin could have served it to his dog. The coin could have used it as fuel. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri didn't respond that way. So it's proof that he also agrees that there's no value to this chometz because it's osher ba'ano, because he does not hold the Rabbi Yochanan. Yet nevertheless, you're mechuyev to pay back the coin to truma because it's l'fei midah mishalem, and therefore, even though it has no value, you're still mechuyev to give it back. We have 1 minute left, so we can hop right. Talking about oichel kazayis truma. If you eat a kazayis of truma, mishalem keren b'chaimish. Abishalomer achi hey boy shavar pruta. A kazayis is not enough. It has to be a shavar pruta. It has to be valuable. My time is the Tanakama. What is for the Tanakama that we don't care what its value is, as long as it's a kazayis? Because it says in the pasuk, "Ish ki yoichal kodesh b'shkaga v'achilo is b'kazayis." Rabbi Shol, my timer, what's his reasoning for saying that it has to be a shavar pruta? Amakrav and Nosan, it has to be a nesina. Nesina pachas shavar pruta, and nesina means a shavar pruta. Ve'idach, what about the Tanakama who holds that it only has to be a kazayis, it doesn't have to be a shavar pruta? I'm sorry. What about the Tanakama who says? What about Abba Shol who says it has to be a shavar pruta? It says yoichel. Who prat lemazakuda also? It says v'achal to tell you that if you took the truma of a coin and you burnt it, you damaged it. There you don't have these halachas. The halach of keren v'chaimish only applies for eating truma. The Tanakama haksiv v'nasan. What about the Tanakama who says it's only a shir kazayis? It says v'nasan it has to be a shavar pruta as well. The davar arayli is kodesh. The v'nasan is not what you're focusing on. It's v'nasan it's a kodesh, and we learn from there that you don't pay back the coin with money. You pay it back with payers. So that's why it says v'nasan, but you can't deduce from the nasan that it also has to be a shavar pruta. Okay, let's stop here.
Yeah.